You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show. All right, welcome to the podcast. We have on a great guest today, the host of Tapping Creativity podcast. He also is a documentarian. He did a film called Hardball, which is on Amazon, and also the author of The Creative's Handbook, Matthew Temple. Thank you for being on.
Well, it's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I love the fact that you're a filmmaker and you have your own process of creativity. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to bring you on and kind of dive into that for our audience. Before we launch into that, though, I want to get just a little bit on your origin story and what brought you into doing all of this.
I generally say I was just an accidental filmmaker. I really thought I was going to study theater when I was in college. I started a family really young, though. I have 4 grown children. And so I went back to college with kids, and I realized pretty quickly that the theater took time in the evenings when I needed to be working to provide for the family. And I thought, I'm just going to take a screenwriting 101 class, see how that goes. And that ended up becoming my first feature film that I produced. And wrote, and then that just kind of, I guess you'd say, it just kind of snowballed into, making movies, developing. I spent years working in development in LA.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the other things too, even for, being on your show, and has really benefited me a lot in as a screenwriter, and also working with other screenwriters and developing is, as a filmmaker, the development people are kind of like, they're just the people that give you annoying ideas that you have to figure out how you can avoid doing their stupid idea while still making them happy. And I was like, that was me. But there is actually kind of, being sort of an indie filmmaker and having written a lot of stuff that nobody has ever seen or will ever see, get into that process of kind of getting your hands dirty. And then when you're in that development room and you're working, you hope that you get to the point where what you bring to the table is invaluable in moving that forward. And I'd like to believe that I got there, but, talk to some of the writers that I worked with, and they'll tell you one thing to your face or to my face and then say one other thing maybe behind my back. But yeah.
I think that being a filmmaker, being a coach and instructor, and having your own book out means that you take this to a different level. You've really thought about it. You really figured out how to break it down from your own perspective. And so I love to have guests on like that so that we can kind of just discuss different perspectives and processes. So let's get into it. What kind of lights you up? What gets you going when you start thinking about creating a project?
I think there are different things at different times. And I think that's also important to recognize that I hope that anybody listening, and certainly for myself, what lit me up at the beginning wasn't necessarily what continued to, and then the way some of those things come back. And so I guess what I mean by that is that, when I started out in this, I thought, I'm going to change the world through telling stories. And there's a ton of hubris in that. And no, I'm not going to change the world by telling stories, and that's okay. But I did, my first movie was called Senses of Place. We have to find a new distributor. It was on Amazon for about 10 years. And
Wow.
We were one of the first streaming titles on Amazon. our distributor, I need to, the rights are up and now it's time to find a new home for that. Even though I'll tell you right now, side note again, that was, we shot it on film and then it was an SD transfer.
Oh, wow.
And so now I'm thinking, oh, I really need to go through and do an HD, remastering. And that's another whole story. But my point was that I started out, and it was a story called Senses of Place, and it's about a young progressive politician who's got great ideas, but also his life is kind of a mess.
Right.
Um, and that was this sort of thing that I was dealing with as a young person who wanted to make a difference in the world. I also, I was married with kids, and when you're in your early 20s and married with kids and trying to make a living, I'm sure there are some people in that situation who everything is perfect and things just sail smoothly and their relationships are great. Everything's wonderful. But that wasn't the case for me. It was not bad, but it was really challenging, right?
Yeah.
Like life was just a challenge. And so I was bringing that into my storytelling, which is this struggle of how to be human, how to be totally imperfect, and yet also how to show up and do your own little part in making a difference. And I would
Well,
say
oh,
that kind of fired me up, right? Like
yeah.
that idea. And then I'll ask the next thing, but that obviously evolved, you know?
Well, I like that you were dealing with whatever personal issues you had, right? And bringing that truth to film. And I got to be honest, Matthew, I have to be
Yeah.
honest. I'm going to challenge you on changing the world thing, because if someone watched your film, right, and they look at the world slightly differently from the film that you had, or it hits a part of them emotionally, you have changed them, even if it's just a little. They
Mhm.
walk away different. And if you have done that, that person will be different in the world. And then you have changed the world. You have changed the world through that one person. So when I hear, oh, it's hubris, I don't think so. I think that's an artist's calling. The thing is, we don't get to see it, right? We don't get to see that we've made a change in the world. But the sheer fact that you've created this art, you've created this film, and you've put it out there, and people have seen it, was in on Amazon for 10 years. Um, you have, like, that is mission success.
And I mean, I like that, and I think that that's one of the things that actually what we're talking about right now sort of highlights one of the beauties of being an artist and a creative is, and even a human being in general, if we can get comfortable with it, is the dichotomous nature of how life actually is. Because
Mhm.
I agree 100% with what you just said. At the same time, literally, I could have never done this. I could die tomorrow, and the world's going to keep on going.
Right.
Um, and and so there's a little bit of that the dichotomy in that, and I think there's kind of living within that paradox. I also think is actually really important as an artist because you actually need something to get you up in the morning, like you know the things that are challenging when the sale's not happening. And in fact,
Right.
even with like Hardball, uh, the last distributor that I went to picked
Yeah.
up picked up the project, and I basically given up. I'd like gone
Wow.
through all of my connections. I was like, okay, you know, nobody wants this movie, which is weird. It's a really good little movie, but
Yeah.
whatever. Nobody wanted it. It was. I thought the timing was pretty good. It was like everybody was saying, hey. And so I'll just say it's a story about a few women who playing, the top women playing baseball in America today.
That's
And if you
cool.
don't know about the top women playing baseball in America today, there's a reason for it. They don't get a lot of attention. Um, and I didn't have a theatrical release. If I had, you would probably know about it.
Right.
Um, but like these amazing athletes who are playing baseball, really against all the odds, and it's a really beautiful story.
Yeah.
Um, but it was like, oh yeah, we need more movies like this. But it was almost as though some of these like mid or smaller indie distributors, there was this, I guess, like, yeah, we say we all want this, but where are the numbers to back that up? We didn't have like the proof. That way I wouldn't get busted by my boss kind of thing. Anyway, I finally found our distributor. We have our premiere. We premiered in San Francisco. Um, and the house was packed.
It's awesome.
And San Francisco has a pretty large like girls baseball movement, and like this whole league of girls who play baseball showed up.
It's great.
And and a couple of the girls were actually in it because we filmed at when Major League Baseball did their first ever event for girls. We were filming it, and a few of the girls showed up, and they came up afterwards, and they got to see themselves on screen. They got to see their heroes, Isla Borders and
Nice.
Tamara Holmes, these women who broke major barriers for women in the sport, made a huge difference in their lives. Like I was even
Yeah,
sometimes thinking about it, I get
exactly.
really emotional. And yet at the same time, like really, like who cares, right? So anyway, I think that's one of the things to be always aware of, is this thing of this dichotomy,
Yeah.
and that's actually okay. And it's probably one of the things that I think when we as creatives get to that point, it also makes life a whole
Yeah.
lot easier, when it's like, oh, this doesn't matter, and at the same time, it matters beyond imagination.
It's so crazy when you think about it. It is a really interesting paradox. I mean, I've sold thousands of copies of my book, and at the same time, I wonder, is anybody reading it? You know what I mean? Like, and then out of the blue, I'll get an email, or I'll get a letter from somebody who said, "This is the book that finally broke down the barriers for me on screenwriting," even though they had taken film classes, they had went to film school. So you just never know. You just have to, accept it's somebody seeing it, and hopefully it goes to whoever needs it. That's what I always want. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world, but as long as it gets to the people who need it, then we're making it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Um, all right. So that's what lights you up. Now, give me a little bit on your process. Like, how do you dive in? Do you outline? Do you do a ton of research? How do you tap your own creativity?
Um, you know, it's also something that that's evolving. I would probably be a house, maybe it'd be a household name if I found my process and I did it every time, and I had I was like Stephen King, and I woke up at 9 a.m. every morning. I sat down at my desk and I wrote, and you know, but I'm not, and that develops a bit and it shifts. When we're talking about screenwriting, um, you know, early on in my career, I wanted to just dive in, right?
Yeah.
And that just doesn't work. I'm sorry. Like there's no professional in the world who just starts writing a script. That doesn't happen. It's too hard of a medium.
It
Right?
is.
Writing a good script was hard. If writing a good script was easy, like you wouldn't have to. Like there wouldn't Rotten Tomatoes wouldn't exist, right? Because we're like, but great writers write crappy screenplays. Great,
Oh, they do.
right?
Yeah.
And and they do in part because it's a really really challenging medium. Like if a painter gets very good at painting, they can go and they can paint whatever they paint, and it's if they know what they're doing, if their craft is good, they will paint a good painting. You might not like it necessarily, but they'll do well, right? They
Right.
know what they understand their craft, they understand the media that they're working with, and it works. Uh, that's just not really the case in what we're doing. So you can sit down and write something that's really terrible, and you probably will, even if you're great. Um, and I even thought when I'm working with others, whether they're students or usually I work with people kind of a little earlier in their career.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You help them
it's
develop.
like yeah, and I'll be like, so when I was vice president of production development for Millie Pictures, I was working with A-list writers who were bringing me projects, and a good friend of mine you've seen his movies. The first draft of a script that he wrote for us was just bad. Just wasn't good. And we got down to it, and his second draft was very good. We actually worked on a project that was fully funded. We were in full production on an animated picture, and the writer of that never actually got it, and the director, who was also an Academy Award nominee, the writer who's an Emmy winner, we never got it. The
Huh.
movie died.
Oh.
They couldn't get the story to work. I could tell you if they just listened to me, it would have been fine. But as the development executive, was trying to stay away from me. But so I know I'm kind of taking a long, circuitous way of answering this, um, but writing a good script is so hard that if you start going in without being prepared,
Right.
it's not going to work. Of course, you can also be way too over prepared, and people do that all the time. It's I
Oh
think
yeah,
as
they
Steven
overwrite.
Pressfield
Sure.
said, right? Or
Yeah.
Steven Pressfield was like, you go to this retreat and you do this and you take this course and you do anything to avoid actually doing the work,
I'll do
right?
the dishes.
Totally, definitely the dishes. Um, this morning I was going to get up and write
Yeah.
before we did this, and instead I don't even know what I did.
My wife caught me at the sink the other day and she says, "What did you do?" And I said, "I'm just prepping to write."
Exactly.
So
But then
no, I
but
get
you
it.
have you have this, and so anyway, when it comes down to it, it's like it's always notes. Um, there are always notes, and it also doesn't mean that sometimes it's not important to, like, when there's that real inspiration, just be like, I'm just going to sit down and write something.
Yeah.
The challenge with that, and for me, it's not a problem anymore. It's going to be bad, and I'm going to have to rewrite it, or I'm probably going to throw it all away, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think if people who aren't professionals in their lives, and maybe you spend 20 hours writing, and you've got 50 pages or whatever, and
Yeah.
then those pages just aren't good enough, and you're going to have to throw them away and start again. Like,
Yeah.
you don't even want to do like rewriting it. You just throw it in the trash. That's really hard because you put a lot into it. At the same time, you're going to do something good, you have to. So, kind of going back to really answer your question, yeah, I always outline. I always do a treatment first. I just go through a process of, I write my like 1 or 2 page synopsis, and then I'll write my like 10 to 20 page outline, and then I go to note
A
cards.
20-page outline.
Yeah. The
Oh
full
my
treatment.
God. That's
Yep.
amazing.
Um, and then somewhere between 10 and 20 pages.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done more than 20, but I mean,
I've seen 40 before, but at that point, it's like, you might as well just write the script.
but then you actually basically have, and that's the thing that's so fun, is once you have that, you can basically go. And this is when, and like, I'm working with 2 people right now, and it's so cool because they were struggling so much, and I'm like, okay, let's trust this process. And you go, we do that piece where you get your, first the synopsis, and then
Yeah.
the one paragraph, and we go to 2 pages, and then we go to 10 to 20 pages. And then from that, you say, okay, now get a stack of note cards and right at the top, your scene heading,
Yeah.
interior, garage day, whatever, and just tell me what happens in there. Boom, put it down. And you do all of those. And you're just pulling, you got on your
Yeah.
screen, and you're sitting there pulling, and you do all that, right? And now you move it around, you get it to where you like it. And now, and this is such the fun part. Now I said, now you take that. This is what I do. You take that, your scene heading and whatever little thing you wrote, and you put that right into final draft.
Yeah.
And you know what happens once you've done that? You've got 20 to 30 pages of your screenplay that are already done.
That's awesome.
And it's like, you got 20 to 30 pages of a screenplay, and
Yeah.
you haven't even started to write the screenplay. And at that moment, and it just happened with the student yesterday, where all of a sudden, he sends me this thing, and it's, I think once he put in all of his scene headlines or whatever, I forget, maybe it was only about
Yeah.
10-ish pages or something like that, all that stuff. But then it's like, great, now go start filling that in from scene one. And literally in just a few days, he's got 20 pages of
Oh,
his
good for
script, and he
him.
knows where he's going.
That's great.
Right. So when you know where you're going, it's so nice. If you just jump right in and you're like, I'm just going to write this thing, you're going
Yeah.
to get lost because you've never spent time with your characters before. And once
Yeah.
you spend time with your characters, you get to know them. And you're like, the thing I thought they might do, they're actually not going to do.
Right.
So,
No,
yeah.
that's a great process. I have a 5-foot long dry erase board, and I will timeline the entire script across this giant board. And then after that, I will timeline it out so I can, because I have to see it. I have to step back and I have to look at it, and it's a very physical process for me. And then I will have my legal pad where I will have my characters, and I will be writing down character traits and notes and histories and wants, needs, and developing them, and then sitting back and looking at this board. I always kind of laugh because it reminds me of those scenes in any kind of thriller where they have like the red string and the board. They have like the red string and the board and they're piecing it together. That's what I do with my scripts. But what I found, and you've probably felt this way as well, is that as I have evolved as a writer, my process has evolved and changed.
Totally.
And I think it's important for anybody out there that, you know, when you first start out, it's not going to be the same way you're going to be writing in 10 years. I mean, I used to have a laptop and I would take it everywhere and I would just sit down and write. And then eventually I started writing in an office. And then I started writing to a specific type of playlist. And I started kind of habitualizing my process to maximize output. And I think that's kind of what this process is. It's a process of evolution.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, in fact, a few months ago, someone reached out to me to basically read their script and critique it for them. And I started reading it, and this is someone who doesn't have any experience in the entertainment industry.
Right.
I'm like, why are you doing this? You know, like you don't have it. First of all, it's a hard medium to write, and once you get it really good, here's the thing: in the proliferation of high quality television, that has created a proliferation of people in writers' rooms who are already making money for their agents.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they all have their own ideas. So what happens, and what I think has made actually getting into, you know, kind of breaking in on your own right now is so much more challenging in the past, even though the opportunities are more. So there's actually already people who are doing it every day and they're more seasoned than you.
Yeah.
Their story might not be better than yours, but they can write a script better than you can because they're sitting in a writer's room every day and they're getting paid. And now they're representatives who are like, I've been taking 10% of your money for the last however long. You've already proven to me that you can make me money. So I'm therefore I'm going to go work for you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so this guy kind of comes, he's like, oh, what do you think? And the reality was, don't make it into don't write a screenplay.
Yeah.
Go write it as something that will stand on its own. Write a book first. And then if you want to adapt your own book into a screenplay to get to know that medium, because it's such a fun medium. I mean, screenwriting is a blast. I love it. I mean, I also hate it, but
well, yeah, that's writing.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
I describe it as the best, worst thing I've ever done.
Totally.
So,
yes,
yeah,
that's exactly right. So, you know, and so I actually took that advice for myself. I started a few days ago this project that I've been pondering for a while, like how to do this, and I haven't been able to crack the story. I had the concept, but not like not the location, not the setting, not even the characters who are delivering it.
Yeah.
And it came to me the other day, and I'm like, you know what? I'm taking my own advice. I mean, I've had, let's see, projects that I've written, I want to say that are features, 4, I think. And I've sold a couple others that never got made. So, but like, that's just not a very good, like, even as a professional, to me, the way I feel is that's not a great track record. I'm not super excited about my odds. And I've written a bunch of things that just never sold.
Right.
And when I was vice president of production development, like I was able to develop projects I really wanted to do. Like we came up with ideas, but then we hired like A-list writers to actually write them.
Yeah.
And, you know, and there were a couple of projects that were sort of my brainchilds that I brought in, and, you know, the company bought it and I developed it, and which was great, but those never got made either. Right. So it feels good that first moment where you're like, oh, here's a bonus check for a project of yours that we're going to develop. And now here's the next one for writing the treatment and setting it all up. Like, that's cool. Feels really good, but it never got made. And now it's sitting on my computer because nobody wants to go, like, nobody on their free time, unless they're super, nerdy, will go pick up a screenplay and read it. It's not a screenplay is an outline for another creative project at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so my advice to this guy was write a novel. And you know what? I took my own advice. I started this week. I'm writing a novel.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's something to be said for creating your own IP, and that is a whole different podcast. But yeah, creating your own IP and getting an audience, and then being able to translate that into a screenplay is definitely a business model that you can try and leverage.
Yeah.
That being said, if you love screenwriting and this is like your medium of expression, do it. Like, because I can't sing, I can't dance. I'm sure as hell not able to paint or any draw, but I can tell you a damn story on a screenplay. So like if that is your voice, I always say go for it and pursue it. But yeah, you got to know it's going to take a long time. There is a ton of competition, and it's going to, it's going to take, like I say, time, talent, and tenacity. But before we go, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't asked you already?
That is a good question. And I don't think I can answer that exactly. Kind of just going back to the last thing that you brought up though, of like if you love it, you do it. I think that's really key. Um, and here's the thing: is if you love writing it, then by all means do it. I think one thing, particularly in screenwriting and in the whole filmmaking world in general, is that we can get a little bit enamored with the result of our writing.
Yeah,
Selling our script, having our script become a movie, having a review written, having
right.
audiences watch it. And that's where the disappointment can come in. There's absolutely no disappointment whatsoever at all if you just enjoy the screenwriting process, then you
Exactly.
can write screenplays every day and nobody will ever tell you not to, and you can love your life. And so
Yeah,
I think that's kind of like that's where that comes in. Can you actually just love sitting down, struggling with your characters and your story and your form and making it
absolutely.
work? And if you can, then it's amazing.
Yeah, you've got to have a passion for it. I mean, if you're looking at your script as a lottery ticket, that's a problem, right?
Yeah,
Because that sets you up for nothing but a world of disappointment. But if this is your voice, if this is your way of expressing your own creativity, do it. And you would be
exactly.
surprised the success that comes from that, because people, when they read a script from somebody whose voice is in that script, who knows the process, who has practiced it and has become an expert at it, they will love that script. That script will do well. If you read a script from somebody who's trying to do, the average, typical romance comedy or action film, they'll read it and it'll fall flat. So
Mhm.
there is something to be said for like finding your passion and getting really good at it.
Exactly. I did come up with the answer to your question though.
Okay.
So the last cup, so Hardball came out about 2 years ago, and about a year ago, a movie called Cage that I produced with Eddie Gathegi and Malor Hardin came out.
Awesome.
Uh, right after I was done in physical production on both of those, I moved to Kenya. Took a year and a half of my life and did a lot
Wow.
of I did like just free workshops and stuff at like local art communities. Gave myself a sabbatical, and I wrote the Creative's Handbook, which is as mentioned, basically it's this kind of breaks down a lot of my process and the way that I found that from the age of like 20 or before I went late teen, pretty much my living has been made doing something in the creative field. And so
Nice.
I was like, how does that work? What is my process? And I actually did put it here. And I always offer anybody who's kind of curious about my process, I offer everyone a MatthewCTemple.com/book. You can book a free call with me. And I love
That's
just spending
great.
time and helping people just like, where are your blockages? What's not working? And what is sort of your unique challenge? And how do we apply a couple of really great techniques into your unique challenge? Everyone has their own challenges that are unique to them, but then they also fall within something. I mean, we're all still humans, so they
Yep.
generally fall within a certain range when we find out where yours is. So I love doing that. It's become something that's just a really fun part of my life, part of my day. So the book, you can get a copy of it at MatthewCTemple.com/handbook. But if you just go /book, like book a time with me, book a time with me, and we'll hang out, and we do it on Zoom, and we have a lot of fun, and everyone feels really good at the end.
Hey, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter by using my handle @ScreenwriterPod, and if you liked the show, please support it by subscribing and sharing the episode on your social media.